how God protected me more than once from relationships that would have been a disaster if I would have married those folks. You know, but I'm ashamed to say it wasn't me who terminated them. In each case, it was the man that terminated them. And I'm so glad God was in that. God was in that. But you know, how much of us are like Samson? It looks good. Get it for me. I want it. Well, anyway, things did not go well because they had the wedding ceremony. And as we know, they decided to appoint 30 people from the town to be his quote-unquote, you know, not bridesmaids, best men and the ones, you know, his attendants. And there's a good evidence that these people were actually warriors in the town, that they were not just attendants. And so Samson decided to give him a riddle. And again, what had happened was not what God had told him to do. Now remember, he was to eat no unclean thing. But when him and his parents were traveling, a young lion had attacked Samson. He had killed the lion by ripping its jaws apart with his great strength. And when they went back the second time, he went to see what happened to the carcass, and there was honey in it. And the bees had gone in there and had made a nest. So he took the honey and he ate it and he gave it to his parents, not telling him it was coming from an unclean animal. Because that was forbidden, definitely forbidden. But anyway, so he gets to this wedding ceremony, and he says, well, if you can solve my riddle, I will give you 30 fine sets of clothes. And these were expensive clothes, folks. They weren't cheap. And he said, if you can't solve the riddle, then you've got to give me 30 sets of fine clothes. Well, they couldn't solve his riddle. Could not figure it out at all. And so they went to his bride and they said, look, you know, you either tell us what's going on here and give us the answer, or we're going to burn you and your dad down in the house. Well, so his wife started crying. The whole time the wedding celebration went on, she was crying and crying and crying. And finally Samson got sick of it and he told her the riddle. And so the town, these 30 men said, okay, here it is. You know, it's about the honey and the lion. Well, Samson knew immediately what had happened. You know, when I was a young child, when somebody said, somebody's been plowing with a heifer, that usually meant that you were, you know, cheating on your relationship, either marriage or pre-marriage. And that's exactly what he said here. He said, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't know this. And what he meant was that if you hadn't messed with my wife to be here, you wouldn't have known this. So anyway, he went down to a nearby town. He killed 30 of the people there and gave their fancy clothing to these guys. And then he left. He left his wife there. Well, the father ended up giving her to the best man. Samson didn't know this, so he goes back, he cools down, and he goes back a while later, a few weeks later, and he finds out that his wife's been given to his best man. And the father says, well, here's a bride, you know, here's her younger sister, take her, she's even prettier. And Samson's like, no, I wanted to marry her, not her younger sister. So he gets very angry, and he goes, we've heard the tale about how he captured all the foxes and he tied their tails together and put the torches on them and put it through their wheat harvest, because they were just getting ready to harvest the wheat, so it was very dry. And he wanted to, you know, get revenge, and he did. He burned down the wheat harvest and the grape harvest and a bunch of other things. And when this happened, they were like, who did this? What is this? And you know, it's interesting too, the original word is jackal, it's not fox. I didn't know that until I was doing some research here for the sermon. But whether it was jackals or foxes, point being, they went through and they burned down the fields. They were not happy campers. Well, the people of the town were so angry that they did take the woman and her father and burn them down in the house. They died. Okay, so this was disaster number one in his life. You know, and again, it's because he really wasn't listening to God. You know, it says, though, it's interesting, and it says that God's hand was in this to get against the Philistines. So, you know, it just shows us that just like with Jacob with his 4 wives and all of these other things we've been talking about, God will still use us, folks. No matter how messed up we are, God will still use us. If we're willing, he will use us. Because we're told that Samson judged the people for many, many years, for 20 years. And in chapter 15 and verse 20 of Judges, it says, Samson judged Israel for 20 years during that period when the Philistines dominated the land. All right, so anyway, chapter 16, he gets into trouble again. He goes down to Gaza and he spends the night with a prostitute. Well, the word spreads that he's there, and he has this great strength from God. So they definitely want to get rid of him, the Philistines. So they plan, they get this party together, and they say, we're going to lynch him at dawn. Well, he leaves at midnight, and when he leaves, he does it in a very interesting way. He goes to the town gates. Now, these were not light gates, folks. These were not like our doors here, okay? These were heavy, heavy gates. Metal, usually. And he picks both of the gates up with the lock, the whole 9 yards, takes it off of their hinges, carries them up the hill, and throws them away. He doesn't just take them off hinge there and go away. He takes them and carries them up a hill, showing what great strength God had given him. So he frustrates their plan. Well, if we go to chapter 16 down to 4, he has problems again. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah who lived in the valley of Sorek. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, entice Samson to tell you what makes him so strong and how he can get overpowered and tied up securely. Then each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Now, folks, that means that each one of them was going to give her, in today's money, about $5,000 to do this. So Delilah bites on this. And we all know the story of how, he would tell her, well, it's I'm tied up a certain way, and he burst those bonds. Finally, he gets closer to the truth. He says, if you weave my hair, he had the long hair because he had taken the Nazarite vow from birth. If you weave my long hair in your shuttle, then I would be weak. Well, that doesn't work. He just pulls it out. And finally, she gets the answer. He says, it's because of God giving me the strength, and if I were to cut my hair, which would symbolize the end of him being a Nazarite, being set apart for God, because that's what it symbolized. The reason that he was not to drink any wine, that he was not to eat any unclean meats, all those things was because he was set apart as a Nazarite. He was to be a symbol of the Messiah. He was to be a symbol of the Messiah. So anyway, we know what happens with Delilah. The Philistines come in. They take him, they capture him, and immediately they gouge out his eyes. They put him into prison. He's there grinding wheat and probably a bunch of other things as well. It's not pleasant for Samson at all. Well, finally, there's a big celebration in the temple. And there's thousands of people in this temple. We know there was at least 3,000 people upstairs in the balcony area. It was probably one of those kind of temples where you had an upstairs with the open, with the open atrium where you could see downstairs. That seems to indicate that in Scripture. But anyway, there's 3,000 of the choice leaders of the Philistines up above, plus more down below. And so Samson tells his slave that's with him, he says, lead me over to the temple, to the supporting pillars here, and I want to lean on them. I'm feeling like I need to lean on them. So he does. The servant leads him there, and Samson leans on those pillars. Now, remember, these are the supporting pillars for this structure. That's how it was built. Samson prays, and he says, Lord, strengthen me once more. I've blown it. But I'm willing to die with the Philistines. Strengthen me once more. Show your power to these people. Because, they were celebrating the god Dagon, the fish god. That was the whole point of the celebration, was to do the celebration for the fish god. So he is there, and they're also saying, look at the power of Dagon versus the power of his God. They're mocking God, folks. And I think that's what bothered Samson the most. I really do. And he realized how much his life had gone in the wrong directions. He had judged Israel for 20 years, but he'd allowed these women to get into his life. But at the last moment, he realizes, God, I want to do this for you and for your kingdom. And God gave him that power. He once again strengthened him, and he pushed against those pillars, and those pillars collapsed. The upstairs collapsed. All 3,000 people were killed instantly. I'm sure however many thousand was downstairs were killed as well, because it says that he killed more people with that than he ever did. Go back to chapter 16 here. It says in verse 29, then Samson put his hands on the 2 center pillars that held up the temple. Pushing against them with both hands, he prayed, let me die with the Philistines. And the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. Folks, I think that there's a lot of lessons we can learn from Samson. First of all, We don't go for what looks good for us. We should be asking God. And how many of us in our young years didn't do that, myself included? How many of us didn't do it? I was blessed that God sent me a wonderful first husband who was studying. He was going to be a theologian, a teacher in college when he died. He was getting ready to get his PhD. And he sent me Dan after that. Oh, a blessed man. He was the head deacon at the Centerville Church when I met him. You know, so God blessed me despite myself. He really did. And, you know, I think God has blessed a lot of us despite ourselves too. But I think one of the biggest stories of Samson is that God will still use damaged goods. He'll use damaged goods. You know, Samson didn't come up in a dysfunctional home. He came up in an extremely functional home. He still messed up. And I think that's a lesson to us. You know, when I did children's ministries for the conference, I used to say to the people at the meetings, look, what better place could there have been than heaven? And God lost a third of his angels. He lost a third of his children. He gives us choice, doesn't he? He gives us choice. And sometimes we really blow it, folks. But you know something? If we're willing to keep our eyes on Jesus, no matter how bad things have gone, he will bless our lives. He will show us. Yes, Manetta, you want to add something?
I have a short 2-page thing that I bring every couple of years. I got it from Betty, and it's always nice to read it and remember it because it's really powerful about Satan and his plan.
He wants to get us all off track, doesn't he?
Yes.
But you know, folks, if we keep our eyes on him, no matter how much he wants to get us off track, you know, God will make those changes. He'll make those changes, and he will bless us always. So, you know, our take-home message, I think, today that I want to give to each one is no matter how much you feel your life has been messed up, has been a disaster, it doesn't matter. God will use each and every one of us. He will use each and every one of us here in this church for his kingdom, if we allow it. We can grow this church, folks. We can be blessed. Let's do that, you know. We have voted to support John. Let's do that, folks. Let's do it. Not just talk about it. Let's do that. Please pray with me. Dear Father in heaven, I thank you and praise you for your blessings so much and for your Spirit. And Father, I thank you for putting your Spirit upon us today. And Father, as we leave here today, I especially ask that you would put your Spirit upon Pastor John, that you would give him strength, that you would give him courage for each day,